So yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to this tips and tricks on WebStorm. Katya says I'm a guru of the platform. Far from it. That also means that she's setting the bar really high. I don't want to set the bar very high for myself. Normally, when I do these kind of tips and tricks sessions on our different IDs, I kind of say, as long as you walk away knowing three, maybe four, four is pushing it, 3 new things, I'm happy with that. So if you learn anything above 3 things, awesome. If not, well, I will look into giving you refunds at some point in my life. So anyway, so what I'm going to show you today is I'm going to basically show you some things that hopefully, the great thing is that, when we have such a large audience, and we do today, a whole bunch of people have shown up, so thank you for that. There's always going to be different levels of people that have used it for different years, and they might know something, they might not know something, but I'm sure there is something that we'll pick up between all of us. So I've divided this up into different sections. So there's going to be a part about navigation, which I'll show you some maybe less common aspects of navigation or things that you're not very accustomed to. Then we're going to move on to text editing, where we'll see some aspects when you're actually working with WebStorm, which is basically writing code, and some code generation and assistance and stuff like that. We'll touch a little bit on refactoring, because refactoring is, there's too much to cover, so I just want to highlight a couple of aspects of it. And then we'll go on to some inspections and customizing WebStorm. And in addition to that, we'll also then look at some various aspects of it, such as the tooling or some other things that maybe you haven't, you're not too used to using. Okay, so with that, we'll start. I love doing presentations. Webinars aren't that interactive because I'm just staring at a screen, so I don't know if you're sleeping, if you're awake, or what have you. So keep the questions going. Katya, don't make sure she doesn't fall asleep so she can be busy answering all the questions. And let's go. Right. So here what I have is WebStorm, and inside WebStorm I have a project. In this case, it's TypeScript, and the reason I chose TypeScript is because a couple of specific features I'm going to show only apply to TypeScript. But on the whole, pretty much everything that you will see applies to JavaScript, which is kind of the main language of WebStorm, as well as Dart and some of the other different languages that exist. So let's start now with navigation. And I'm using the keyboard layout of default OS X 10 Plus, right? So if you actually go to keymap over here, what you want to be using is this one. Mine is copy 0 because I've customized it a tiny little bit, but you want to be using 10.5 Plus if you're on Mac. If you're on Windows, then you probably want to be using the default the default one for Windows or IntelliJ, etc. So let's cancel that. And so what happens is that when I press a keyboard, you can see at the bottom here, it's going to show you the keyboard combination that I've pressed, right? So here I'm pressing Command O, and you can see it pop up, and in practice, it's going to put you the equivalent one if you're using Win and Linux. So Command O corresponds to Command N. So if I write Command O and I write, for example, flying car, you know that that's going to go to flying car. And that allows me to look up an actual class. In this case, since I'm using TypeScript, I do have the ability to look up types. But one thing that people might not be aware of is the ability to have camel completion for anything in WebStorm. So I could actually, instead of writing flying car, I could just write FC, and that will also take me to anything that starts with FC, in this case, a specific class. And the same way for files. So Shift Command O will then take me to files. So I can just write features or say, FM, and that will take me to feature and then the extension map. So you have camel case completion for that as well. So here I can navigate to a specific file or navigate to a specific type. When I'm on a file, I can press Command 1, and that's going to quickly take me over to the project menu. And here again, I can also search. So I can actually start to type board, or let's say IB, and you can see that that takes me to anything with IB or image board, and I can flip through them with the cursor keys. So you can also do searches here. When I'm there, if I want to get back over to the actual file that I'm editing, I could press Escape, and then that will take me to the, enter, and that will take me to the file, but the focus still remains on the navigation of the project. If I want to actually open the file for editing, I can press F4, and then that will flip the focus over to the actual file. Now there's a little gearbox up here which a lot of people don't use, and I actually normally have this available ticked on, which is auto scroll from source. So what that means is that if I open a file, let's say features over here, it will automatically scroll to that on the corresponding project pane. I don't have the reverse. So normally I don't have that. If I navigate through the project pane, then it will constantly flip the actual view over here. But the going into the from file to project pane, I do have. So that's kind of useful to have. Now, all of these search lookups things, then you know that they have basically ability to do patterns. So if I say star car, it will also find me anything that has basically car in it that starts with car, and the same way with features. And what other things that you can do is, let's say, for example, I do features and then do 3. You know what that's going to do? It is not going to open up 3 instances of features. What it is going to do is open up the file features and take me to line 3. So you can do the same with flying car if you have a type. So I can say flying car 10, and that will take me to line 10 of flying car. That's sometimes why I get into these debates on Twitter when people say, you know, WebStorm or IntelliJ or what have you doesn't have line numbers on by default. You don't need line numbers. You don't need space being taken up in that gutter. You want to go to line number, just go to it directly using navigation, or you can even click this thing under here and say, you know, I want to go to line number 10 character 5 or what have you. Now, one other keyboard combination that we have is Alt-Command-O, which basically allows me to find a symbol. So this means that I can look up any kind of symbol across my entire project and be able to find it. So if I do, for instance, toString, well, that's useful because it's going to show me all of the toStrings, but it's not that useful because I have so many toStrings. What I could do is, let's say, let me show you a type here, for instance. Let's go to Mancala. Over here, I should have a file name called Mancala or Mac. Oh. Anyway, I'll look. So let me do it directly. If I go to a type, and if I do f2string, what that's going to do is do completion using filtering. So now what it's doing is looking for the type name Mancala and then going to the string inside Mancala. So basically, the dot allows me to do namespace filtering and type filtering in the case of TypeScript to go to that specific symbol. So it's useful, but it's not that useful if you have many symbols. You can use that filtering. So I can just say, for example, flying car, and then flying car. Flying car probably doesn't have anything. Start, there you go, flying car start, and that's going to take me to start inside the type flying car. Okay, so that's also very useful to do things like that. Shift-Command-O that we saw previously also allows you to work with folders. So if I do, for instance, simple features, or I am on the right project, let's say, for example, simple, let's see, do I have an actual symbol here? Oh, okay, we'll do image board. So if I say, for example, image board, and inside image board, I can then navigate to that actual folder or inside any kind of folder inside image board. Okay, so those are just some patterns that you can use when you're using the command that go to type, go to file, or go to symbol. Now, one thing that we introduced in the platform some time ago was search everywhere, which is double click. And basically what that allows you to do is combine all of those keyboard shortcuts into a single shortcut. However, when it says everywhere, it really does search everywhere. So I could do, for example, flying car here, and you can see that I get the classes flying car, and then I could tab to get the symbols flying car. Or if I do, for instance, features, I can get the features, but I also get classes, I get files, I get symbols, and if I click more, I get more information here. And when I say everywhere, if I write plugins, that also actually allows me to get to actions of WebStorm. So I can write plugins and hit enter, and that will bring up the actions. What it also allows me to do is switch things on and off. So for instance, you see that I have the toolbar at the top. I can just hit toolbar, and here it says show main toolbar with the little switch, and if I hit enter, it will switch it off. If I hit enter again, it will switch it on. And you can also have history. So if I just press the back key cursor, I can basically scroll through all of the things that I've done in the past to be able to see all of the things that I've been looking up. Okay, so that's somewhat useful as well to use. You can, of course, use that if you want to, use it for going to files, etc. But I often use it more in aspects of navigating through the projects, through the IDE, etc. Okay, and you can use the tab as I showed previously to jump to the different categories. Now let's go over to this Mancala. I don't know why this is Mancala. That's weird. Let's go to strings. Weird. Anyway, I always say I'm using a eval, EAP. So if some strange things happen, that's why. So here I have the Mancala module. Oh yeah, it's a module. Sorry, I don't know why I was looking up that as a class. So here I have the Mancala module, and if I press Alt F7, then what? Sorry, Command 7. Then what that's going to do is give me the project structure. So on the left hand, I can now see all of the different project structure. And again, here, I can, in any window in WebStorm, you can basically start to type and just go to the different entries. And this is one way of doing it. The other way is basically to have a floating window, which is with Command F12. So I get the same kind of feel, but using the actual floating window as opposed to the structure on the side. So here I can see, well, you don't want to open this on one of these large files, but if I go, for example, to the interfaces and hit Command F12, we can see that I get the same kind of floating window with the same ability to kind of search for different elements inside it. Now, let me switch on something that I don't normally have on, navigation bar. So you see that here I have this navigation bar, and basically this is a breadcrumb that takes us through the different sections of the file, of the project that we're on. Now remember, in WebStorm, a project is basically a folder. So you can just open any folder, and that would be, and I'm doing quotes, a project. So it's not there's no specific file type or anything like that. It uses this .idea folder, which we'll look at a little bit later on. And what this is doing is basically navigating through this folder of different files. And anywhere here, I can actually invoke action. So I can do a file new, and inside that is context sensitive. Now, I don't normally have this navigation bar open because really I don't use it that often, and it takes up some precious real estate. So what I normally do is this navigation bar is switched off, and then what happens is if I want to invoke it anywhere I am, I can just press function key Alt and left, and then that will bring the navigation bar up for me. And inside this, I can still do searches. And inside this, I can still invoke new commands. And so what happens now, and we'll see how to create a new file like this later on, but what's happening now is that I would actually create a new file directly inside the folder to do MVC. So it's context aware of where and what we're doing. Okay, so that's a useful tip as well, to kind of switch that off and then just invoke it whenever you want. Now, one thing you probably notice, and I've actually written about this in the past, is if I click on all of these different files, and you can see that what's happening is that I only have a single tab open, right? I don't have multiple tabs. I don't like multiple tabs, and I actually think that they're a little bit useless, especially when you have a lot of navigation features that we provide on the IntelliJ platform and on WebStorm. So we kind of like, there are actually bug reports in our issue tracker saying, like, you know, once I hit 600 tabs, the lines start to jump up and down and tabs move position. Okay, look, right, you don't need to reach 600 tabs. You don't need to reach 10 tabs. In fact, what you do with tabs, you go to settings and you say tabs, and you find edited tabs. And what you do is you just set it to 1 or you set it to 0. I set it to 1 so that I can quickly see the file name, because by default, well, now it's available there. You can see the layout J, but I kind of like seeing the file name there, but you can set it to 0 as well if you want. And just get rid of your tabs, because, you know, sometimes you say, no, I need the tabs because I'm working on 5 files at the same time, and I need to, you know, use the mouse to navigate back and forth through the tab. You don't. First of all, don't touch the mouse. The best way to learn WebStorm and the most efficient way to do WebStorm is to not use the mouse. I'm not using the mouse. This is a touchpad. And to all practical effects, it's just for the demo. But get rid of the mouse. Don't focus on the mouse. Use the keyboard navigation features that WebStorm provides you. So what do you do then if you're working on 2 or 3 files? You use navigation. If you press Command E, what that gives you is recent files. So what this allows me to do is go through the recent files. And again, here I can search, right? So if I want to go to index, I go to index. If I hit Command E and hit enter, you see it starts to flip back and forth between the 2 recent files that I've viewed. and I can go to any file here. In fact, if I hit Shift Command E, what that even gives me is the recent edited files. So when I am working on 2 or 3 files, I could even distinguish between those that I'm actually working on and those that I'm viewing, those that I'm editing and those that are read-only. So use these features to navigate back and forth. And in fact, if you look at the double shift, you can see that by default, it displays recent files. That's why that dialog box, kind of like the drop down, appears, because it's displaying recent files. And of course, you can navigate back and forth in different ways. So I can, for example, press the command left square brackets, right square brackets to also navigate back and forth, if, of course, but this takes into account the actual position of the cursor. So if I'm in multiple places in a single file, it wouldn't work to switch back and forth through files. And of course, I also have the control tab. So the control tab allows me to actually navigate through the switcher and also through different windows of WebStorm. Okay, so really, honestly, I don't say this that, you know, I'm not even the person in charge of fixing the bugs with minor bugs that are with tabs, but you really don't need tabs. Tabs in browsers, they're great. In IDEs, they're not so great if you have the proper navigation. Okay, so let's go and navigate to a symbol here. I'm going to go for test browser, for instance. So I have a test browser function here. And now, for instance, here, if I'm on test browser here, you also have different types of navigation. So Command B would actually go to the function declaration, which is the same as putting the cursor on and pressing the mouse. But again, don't use the mouse. Then let's say, for instance, we can go to driving, drivable, or something like that. A driver, no, not driver. Let's go back to car. I have car, so I have drivable, and what that allows me to do is pressing Command E, sorry, not pressing Command B. If I press Alt Command B, what that allows me to do is give me all of the implementation. So in this case, it's an interface in TypeScript, and I can get all of the implementations. What I can also do is press Command B, of course, and go to the interface declaration. Now, this is in the same file, so it doesn't really take you out of context. It's not that big of an issue, right? Because if I'm here and, you know, let's say, for example, I'm here and I press Command B, it takes me over to the interface, but I kind of lose my context and I have to press Command left square brackets to go back. If you just want to see something, what you can do is just get the inline definition. So you can just press Command Y, and then that gives you the inline definition, and it doesn't take you out of the actual context that you are on. Okay, so that's again good for when you're trying to avoid this kind of context switching that often you get. And one thing that someone once said to me is like, you know, sometimes I am you know, invoking a function. So for instance, let's say here that I'm invoking I don't know, drive. Let's say if drive were drive's not going to work. Let's say, I don't know, get element by ID, which isn't going to work in this context. Okay, so what happens is that I sometimes lose the completion, right? The IntelliSense in terms, not the IntelliSense, yeah, well, the information about the parameter info. So if I want to get that back up, what I can do is press Command P, and then it provides me with that information. Of course, if you're using something like JSDoc, which we'll see later, it will get even better information for you because you'll get some insight, given that a lot of this is JavaScript. Okay. Beyond that, other navigation features is, for example, bookmark mnemonics. So I can press Command, Alt F3 and set mnemonics for different bookmarks. Then I can see all of my different bookmarks by pressing F3. Command F3. So here I can see all of the different bookmarks I've set. I can eliminate bookmarks, set more bookmarks. So those are also good navigation features to go back and forth. Okay. I don't know how we're doing with questions, Katya. I'm just going to assume that you're handling them all. So I'm going to move on to show some aspects of text editing. One new feature which actually we're going to use now, which we've introduced recently, and people don't know that much about, although it doesn't have a hotkey I've assigned to it, is opening recent projects. So I've assigned it to Control Command O because it was the only one that was similar remotely to open, and it was available. So yeah, it kind of gets hard to find keyboard combinations that are actually available on our platforms. So what I can do is here just open another project, and I'm going to say, yeah, let's open it in this window, and we'll look at some editing things over here. Okay, so what you saw before, what I was doing is I can come here in any file, and I was invoking this. Let's go ahead and close this. Tasks, let's see. We can do it, for example, here. Okay, so what I had here is the kind of ability to create files quickly. So what you never want to do in IntelliJ is go right-click and then say new file, etc., or do file new. You don't want to do that. What you do is you press Command N and you create the file, right? So I can create a folder as well. I can create a folder called HTML, right? And let's say inside HTML, I want to create a folder called root. Now I could do create HTML, and then inside here come down and create folder and say root, and then inside here create my file, which is going to be HTML index, right? I could do that, or what I could do is just create it in one go. So I could say directory HTML root, and that will create directory HTML root. Or I can take it one step further and say let's create an HTML file in HTML root index, and that will create the HTML directory, root, and index. That's how you create files. And that invoking of that command N works everywhere. If it's inside the editor, you have to press Control Alt N. And if it's on the project folder, you can just press Command N. So here, Control Alt N, and you can do the same thing. And these are as part of the file templates, which we'll see quickly a little bit later on. Okay, now look at my window, look at my screen area. It's horrible, right? And rightly so. You know, a lot of people when they're used to text editors or to Vim or to Emacs or to other editors, they come and they're like, this is horrible. Like, you know, you're giving me this much area to write my code. This is horrendous. Yes, because this is not how you should be working with code. What you want to do is you want to get rid of all of these window panes when you're not using them. And of course you can minimize each of these and just like, you know, lower them. And then if you want to invoke them, you just use the number here. So I can just press Command 1 and then press Command 1 again. And that will basically open and close this. Or I could have a layout, for example, that sometimes I want to have this specific layout and I want to see my grunts, tasks, etc. And if I want to quickly go into edit mode, what I can do is just do Shift Command F12, and that will get rid of all of the screens, all of the tab windows for me, and just leave me with a clean blank canvas for me to work with. Obviously, I still have my toolbar, but we'll see how to get rid of that as well. So that's how you can quickly switch back and forth from editing to kind of seeing all of the full picture. Now, when I do that, you can see that this is still available. I can actually click on that and get rid of that as well. And I can click on it again and show it again. Now, I said that everything you can pretty much do with the mouse, with the keyboard in WebStorm. So I can press Command twice and get that as well, and then hit the actual button. In fact, you can really do everything. You see right now, I'm resizing the project window just using the cursor keys. I am not using the mouse. So really, pretty much everything you can do with the keyboard. So here, if you want to take it one step further, we have also the view of enter presentation mode or distraction-free mode. So what this will do is, I'm not sure if you're going to see this because this is going to move into full screen mode. So this one actually gets rid of all of the toolbars and it just gives me like a black canvas. It doesn't shut down Twitter or Facebook, unfortunately, but it does do its part to get you into distraction-free mode. And then the next version is enter presentation mode, and this will actually get rid of everything, make it full screen, which I won't do because webinar might mess up. And this also allows you to set different fonts. So if I type presentation mode here, you can see that I can actually set the font size. So that's exactly what it's for. It's for making things larger, including the project window, everything for when you're doing presentations. Also notice that when I'm looking for things, I don't navigate and start saying, oh, where did I forget that little thing? What you want to do is you want to search for stuff. Okay, you just directly search for stuff and then click through the short number that it provides you. Okay. If you're a Vim fan, go to plugins and click on Idea Vim, install JetBrains plugin, and you can install this plugin. Once you do, don't ping us to say you can't exit WebStorm. That's your own doing. But if you're a big fan of Vim, I've heard, I don't use it personally, but I've heard that it's pretty decent. So you can use that. And install JetBrains plugins basically means we've got like over 1,200 plugins on the repository. Those that are JetBrains means they're done by us. Those that aren't JetBrains are done by third parties. So you can just go to Browse repository and install all of the different plugins there. And yeah, that's about it in terms of moving things, the focus of the editor. And now let's look at a little bit of actually working with code. So here, for instance, if I want to select some code, what I don't want to do is this. I don't want to use the mouse, right? And what I don't want to do is come here and select and then use the cursor keys. We have this thing called expand selection. So extend selection. So if I press Alt up, it will select that identifier for me and so forth, and it will continue to expand and shrink based on the up and down that I click. Now this is context sensitive. So if I come on a function and I hit up, it's going to select the function name. Next time it's going to select the entire function. Okay. If I come here and select up, it's going to select the entire import block. So that's how you normally kind of like extend selection and select things. And then what you want to do is, if you want to move things around, again, you can select it like that and then just use the Shift Alt up to move things around like that. What you don't want to do is press Control X and then come here and press Control V, because normally you know what happens. When you do that, you're going to press Control X again and you're on a blank line, and you're going to press Control X again, and now you're screwed because you've lost your keyboard, your clipboard. But fortunately, you haven't. If you press Shift Command V, you can get it all back. Okay, so I can actually get back all of my clipboard and put things back exactly where they were. So if that happens, you can do it. By the way, Command comment comments the line very quickly. Okay, and if you go on it again, it uncomments it. So that's a very fast way. If you want to, and the same way, Alt up on a blank area of a line will select the entire line. If I want to select multiple lines, I can also comment it out by just pressing Shift Control and the comments. So that will insert a different kind of comment. Instead of the line comment, it will insert block comment. Now, we also have support for multiple carets. So you can select your cursor and then just select anywhere you want and say, remove all this nonsense or unsense. So we also have support for multiple carets, much like some other editors, and you can move them around and do funky things with it. And also you can select, for instance, if I'm on the word require, I can press Control G and that will select all of the requires. Or if I want to select all of the requires, I can just press Command Control G and that will select all of the requires and get multiple carets and including multiple pastes. Okay. Now, when it comes to writing, actually, like the formatting of the code and that, and this applies to all languages, often I can like see there's some code, people write code very weirdly, and they can put things like that, and then they don't have their, they spend a lot of time trying to indent things, and then they can spend some time alphabetically sorting their variables and stuff like that. You don't want to do that manually. We have this ability to do reformatting of code and code cleanup. So you can just press Alt Command L, and what that will do is clean up the code for you, including formatting based on your formatting settings. And what are those settings? So there's different ways. As you know, or you might not know, WebStorm now supports editor config. So if you have a project that has editor config, as soon as you import it, that will basically override all of the formatting settings for WebStorm. If you don't use editor configs, you can actually go to code style, for instance, for JavaScript and for all the other things. And let's say, for instance, JavaScript, here I can define how I want my spaces, how am I wrapping, braces, blank lines, etc. And this is the default. And what you can also do, of course, is you can set it at a project level. And this is one of the important things, because remember we spoke about a .idea folder. So if I go to terminal here, let's go to Dropbox, presentations, WebStorm, tips and tricks. So here is moment. You can see that here I have this LA, I have a folder called idea. And inside this folder idea, there's different files, right? And some of these, like the workspace, a couple of them, you don't check in. The rest, you can actually check into version control. And then this allows you to share code styles, etc. That's when you're using the JetBrains, the WebStorm code style. You can also use the JavaScript code style. So we have support for JSCS, and I can say enable that, and then you either pick up the package from the actual project or use a preset one. Let's say, for example, Douglas Crockford's, and then as soon as I hit apply, all hell will break loose, and I've got to like fix up all the code formatting. But the code cleanup formatting will then apply those settings. Okay, so it does work independently of the style that you choose when you want to do code formatting. Another feature that we, I can actually show you, one of the things that we also provided recently is the ability to have different code formattings based on different files. So later on, when I open a project, you might see up here a little tab appear, a little warning appear saying, you know, this file has indenting of set to 4, but the current file is only at 2. What do you want to do? If you say, OK, apply the 4 indent settings, then when I run code cleanup, it will apply those settings. Last but not least, in terms of editing, Command-N, as I said, creates a new file. But what that does, it creates a file that basically becomes part of the project. What we recently added is the ability to do like single edit files. So files, what we call scratch files, which you just basically want to create a scratch file that doesn't necessarily belong to the project. You want to write some JavaScript to test, you want to write some CSS, whatever. You can basically create that file, and then when you're done with it, pretty much close it off, and you're good to go. And one last thing, we also have support for, I know that we said we only have one editor tab, but if you want to do split windows, you can also do that. So like, a typical scenario with this is if you're doing, for instance, TDD, so you can have your code on the left-hand side, you can have your tests on the right-hand side, and then you can switch back and forth between these two windows. Obviously, if you want to go overboard, you can. So I can split this horizontally, and then I can go again, and I can split this vertically, and go until your heart's content, and split as much as you want. So that ability is also available. Okay, right. Now let's switch over to another project, and this one is going to be my Express app project. So yes, I want to hit it on this window, and let's see what we've got here. So a few more things in terms of editing, but around code generation and templates. We have this thing in the platform which is called live templates. And live templates basically are code snippets, right? They're code snippets that are interactive. So for instance, if I type func in a JavaScript file, what that will do is provide me with a code snippet that is interactive, defined by these parameters. So anything enclosed in $ is a parameter. So let's go open a file here, and if I write, you can see that I get all of the different so this is saying, don't do that. Okay, something wrong with my code snippet, but anyway, that's meant to actually expand. For some reason it's not, or is it? Yes, it is. Okay, yes, no, correct, sorry, I was thinking of something else. Yeah, so basically that's gonna expand as a code snippet. And we can have, for example, iterator, etc. So this in principle should also work. If I come here and write iter, that will create an iterator for me with a noise level. The formatting is a little bit messed up there, but anyway. So those are live templates, and you can define your own live templates. So for instance, you can see that here I have a bunch of templates which I've defined not in terms of JavaScript, but in terms of Markdown. So I have, for example, Markdown image, and then each of these are variables, and you can edit these variables. So when I come to function here and I say edit variable, parameter name can actually take an expression, or it can, for instance, take a value of a previous macro, a previous variable, and apply something to it. So I could say capitalize the string or do what have you. If it's a value that's defined, I can say skip it, I can give it default values, etc. There's a special one which is called end, which allows us to say where we want that cursor to be. And much like anything else, this can actually be exported, etc. And you can define where this is available. So here I can say it's available inside JavaScript expressions, or inside everywhere, or inside HTML, etc. So if I come to mine, we can see that this is available inside everywhere because I didn't try and cut it down. And for different types of languages, we can have different types of live templates. And the file templates, which are what you see when we create new templates, basically that's the same thing. We're actually using these live templates. So here I can define my own live templates that, well, file templates, again with placeholders. So I can say, you know, I want my specific one which has some licensing information or a specific information about the date or time or what have you, and then we can add it to the quick list so that when we do file new, it will show up. Last but not least, and we'll see this a little bit when in action, is surround templates, which allow us to basically surround code that already exists. Okay, so here, for instance, if I take this and I can, let's select this line, and then if I do Alt Command T, this will allow me to surround it with some code. So I can say, for instance, we'll try catch finally, which doesn't make much sense here, but it allows me to surround it with some code. So you can use the same kind of template definition to do the same thing. And of course, that works in HTML as well. So if I go, for instance, to, let's go to index.html, I can, let's go ahead and create a P and then some element here, and I can select this element and then say, let's surround this with a div. So we say div, and then that surrounds that with a div, and then this one complains because it says you don't want to have a div inside a P, but hey, I'll do what I want in the demo. Okay, so you can use that surround templates there also. By the way, now that we're on HTML and talking about code generation, there is one other thing that you should know, which is Emmet. So if I want to create, for instance, a bullet list, what I don't want to do is this, and then come here and copy and paste, because that's wrong. You can actually press Control D to duplicate, but that's wrong as well. What you want to do is use Emmet. So I can say, create a div for me, which is called my div, and inside that I want a bullet list, and I want times, let's be adventurous, 30. And that will create a div for me, and inside that it will then create 30 divs. By the way, if you're planning on crashing WebStorm, you won't be able to, because it says the output is too big. So don't try doing that at home. Okay, so that's a fast way to also generate HTML. Now, in terms of actual completion, as you know, WebStorm provides you with IntelliSense and completion. So for instance, if I go to here and I do index request, oh, there you go. So this file is indented with 8 spaces instead of 4. Okay, I want to indent with 4, and then let's do a code cleanup, and you can see that that's fixed. Going back to the completion, I write request and hit square, or I can just press Control space, and that provides me with simple code completion. Now, in static languages, and to a certain extent, although this isn't very viable in dynamic languages, we have the ability to offer smart completion. So for instance, in the case of a static language, if I'm creating an instance of a class, why do I want to do a new on any potential class that starts with the letter B? I would only want to do it on those that inherit from the interface or the class which I've declared. So you can actually type smart completion, and you can see that that list is reduced. It no longer scrolls all the way, right? Now in JavaScript, this is somewhat hard to kind of guess. So use it sparingly. But we do offer this kind of completion. And this completion is basically based around the projects that are in your file. Sorry, the files that are in your projects. Now here you can see that there's a library home. What does that mean? That means that for node modules, anything that's in your directory, basically we're analyzing and we're doing analysis on JavaScript analysis, and then when you refactor it, would go and refactor things like that, etc. We're using it for code completion, etc. But there are some things that we don't need to analyze. I don't need to analyze node modules from third parties because I'm not going to anytime go and do quick fixes on them. I don't want to do anything like that. But we do use them for completion. And that's where the libraries are. That's where the external libraries are. So by default, JavaScript defines a bunch of libraries. And if you have libraries that, for example, or JavaScript files that are hosted on content delivery networks, etc., what you can do is add them as external libraries. And then WebStorm will use those for completion, but it won't use it for other aspects of working with the project. So that's a way to get completion on things that potentially aren't part of your project directly. And two last things. Also, there is the ability to do what we call hippie completion. So let me find, for instance, where I had that, utils. So here you see that I have name, number, noise level. So if I do this and then do hippie completion, that's not hippie completion. If I do hippie completion and I type n, what it's going to do is going to loop through everything that is n. And I can go backwards as well and forwards and find anything that's n. So that basically with camel case, etc., also works. And one last thing, and this is part of Spy.js, which is our profiling tool. If you run Spy.js, what Spy.js is basically going to do is going to analyze and profile your application at runtime, right? So what you want to do there is you're hitting your application. Spy.js is figuring out what's going on. So this is actually now open the browser window for me in another screen. So I'm just going to hit it, and you can see that I get some hits coming through here. If it's actually working, let me bring this over. There you go. So you can see that I get some information coming through, and I can drill down and see the timing, etc. This is all part of Spy.js. And what Spy.js also allows us to do is this enable Spy.js autocomplete and magnifier. So what this effectively means is that since Spy.js has run this code, if I do request and completion, I can now see with more accuracy what properties could potentially interest me because these properties have already been hit. So this is basically providing you with runtime information for you to get somewhat of a better, more accurate kind of completion based on what you've already been using. Okay? Now, moving on, really quickly, I just want to mention a couple of words about refactoring. One thing that I often find is a lot of people are doing manual refactoring. And one of the reasons that a lot of our users were asking for multi-caret support was to do refactoring. Don't ever do manual refactoring. I know with JavaScript, refactoring is somewhat limited, but before you try and do anything manual, press the Control-T menu to get the refactor this and see what potential refactorings it offers. So you can have change signature, move, copy, variable, parameter, extract variable, parameter, method, make a method in line, etc. First, examine the refactoring, and only if it's not available, then proceed to manual refactoring. But before that, file an issue and say, I need this refactoring. Hopefully you can work on it. Okay, so you want to not do any much manual refactorings there. And about refactoring, that's all really what I've got to say, because the rest is pretty much discoverable. Let me quickly switch back to the Moment project. We've just got some analysis left, and then a couple of tips and tools and stuff that I'll show you quickly, and then we can wrap up. So, excuse me. So here, for instance, one of the things that when you start working on with IntelliJ, you open up and you see this little yellow thing here. Now, this yellow thing is basically our analysis, the quote-unquote static analysis in terms of JavaScript. We do analysis for HTML, Jade, everything. And it's basically potential issues that we can find. So think of this kind of like JS hint, JS lint. And you can hover over and see the magnifying, loop over, see the potential issues. We normally provide you with that light bulb, which basically means remove or do a quick fix. In this occasion, it's going to remove the parameter. So not only do we warn you of potential issues, but we also allow you to quick fix it. And if you click on this, if you right click, you can see that there's a go to next problem or go to high priority problems only. What this effectively means is that now I only go through errors because IntelliJ and WebStorm offer you different levels of inspections. So here, if I go to inspections, you can see that I have, for instance, for JavaScript down here, I have all of these different inspections. So for code quality or code style, JavaScript, function metrics, and I can enable this. And when I enable, I can set the severity level. So I can say severe, info, warning, etc. So if we say high priority only, that will basically filter out everything else and only show you errors. Navigate to errors. It won't filter everything out. You'll still see them here, but when you do navigation, which you can do via next method or previous method, it will skip other issues and only show you errors. Okay, so that's in terms of our inspections. So you can see them here, and you can enable them, disable them, you can create them per project, you can manage them, you can export them, and import inspection, etc. If you're more used to something like JS Hint or JS Lint, you can also enable that for your project and then get all of those inspections that JS Lint or JS Hint offer you. But I would highly recommend that you also look at the inspections that we offer, because we do offer some kind of valuable info around potential issues. Now, all of these inspections are built in, and they apply for HTML. So I can have, for instance, empty tag, file reference problems, etc. But they also, all of them basically are built in. The only way for you to extend this would be to write a plugin. However, we have another feature which is really rarely used by people, which is called structural replace and search. So let's do a search structurally. What this allows me to do is search across my project for a specific pattern. So think of this as kind of like an advanced regular expression combined with templates. I've got a couple of examples here. I did have a couple of examples here. Let me go to my Express.js app, actually. I think that's where I had them. So let's go and open this Express app. I don't want to have to redo these. So search structurally. So you can see that what I'm doing here is I'm saying search for any divs inside it, file types HTML that have a variable class name, class with a variable value class name, and I can edit this variable and I can give it a regular expression or a text value, minimum count, maximum count, etc. And if I do a find, what that will do is find me anything that matches here. Right? I could say, for example, only find me those that, so you could say, well, I could have done this using a string, a find. Yes, but this is actually patterned. So I could actually say, for instance, only find me those that have UL elements inside. So if I had, for instance, here something to with no UL elements, then that wouldn't work. And this structural search works for JavaScript as well. So here's an example I had with JavaScript where I'm, for instance, looking for a function. There you go. So here I'm looking for the pattern where we're declaring a function to a variable and then we're repeating the name of the function just before the parameters. And if I do find, it will now find me those functions that match that kind of pattern. Now, the great thing about this is not only that it allows me to search across the entire project, but the next step. So if I say replace structurally, what this allows me to do is, for instance, replace them. I'm not saying, note that I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good thing in this case, but it allows me to do this. So I could now search for this, and then once I find this, replace it. So effectively what I'm saying here is that you can use structural search and replace to find your own code smells in your code and do searches and replace, or help people by raising awareness of them. Because the structural search and replace, if we go to inspections over here, structural search is also an inspection. So I can define structural searches and add them as inspections and set the severity level. So when that kind of bad code pattern, for instance, appears in my JavaScript or HTML, I can warn someone that that is a potential issue and they should kind of avoid doing something like that. All of those inspections, you saw that you can run them, have them on and off, but you can also run inspections individually. So if you don't want to have, for instance, an inspection always activated, you can say, raw undeclared or undefined property assignment, and then just run that inspection across your project. And you can also run the inspection across the entire project, obviously, not only see them in the gutter, by just going to code and saying inspect code, and then that could do it for the whole project or for a file or for a custom scope, etc. Okay, so that would now find all of the issues inside and then allow me to, it will categorize it by output. Okay, so here I can see, for instance, spelling mistakes, HTML, CSS, and gives you an explanation of why, and then you can drill down, for example, unused favorite icon, etc. Okay, so that's about it. Now let me just go over through some of the various tools that might not be that known. First of all, I hope that you're aware that you can actually, you can use version control with WebStorm. So I can, if we go to the kind of like the welcome screen, if I close this project, and I do, for instance, check out from version control. Now it has full integration with GitHub, including authentication, but I'm not even going to use GitHub. I'm just going to say, check out this, and I want you to check out this, for example, to my temp folder, temp, blah, blah. Oh, must exist. Okay. So moment.js 10, and then that will go off to GitHub, clone the repository, and is it asking me for a, hold on a second. Did I say GitHub? Check out from version Git. That should actually work. Oh, it's asking for that. I don't know why it's asking for that. Okay, never mind. That should actually work. Trust me, it worked 100 times. I could actually do it with the file open. I could say git VCS Operations, check out from version control, and say git. I don't know why it's giving me. Maybe because actually I have that. Hold on a second. Let me just cd10. Let me try that again because I deleted the temp folder. Maybe it's doing something quirky on that. No, anyway, doesn't want to work for me today. Right, but trust me, it does work. What that also means, of course, is that we have full VCS integration. So you can now go to Git, you can commit files, you have a whole bunch of things. And I can't go through all of this extensively, but when I first came to the IntelliJ platform, I was reluctant to the integration stuff, having had past experiences with other IDEs. But I've got to say, and it might sound biased, it probably is, but I really like the integration for Git that IntelliJ provides. Of course, it not only provides for Git, but Perforce, CVS, Subversion, all of those things. So these quick things, operations like VCS also allow you to have like this quick menu. So I can have like if I press Control V, that will give me the quick access to the menu for VCS operations. But the great thing about these quick menus is that you can actually define them yourself. So if you go to quick lists, I can create my own kind of like menus and then define any element or any property I want on that menu. And then if I go to keymap and say, for example, deployment, in this deployment, I can also add a shortcut key, right? So now I can invoke my quick list quickly, no pun intended, with a shortcut. So I'm not limited to these quick list menus that WebStorm ships with out of the box, but we can actually define our own. One quick thing, if you're using WebStorm and you're pairing with other people, what you want to do sometimes is that they use maybe a different keyboard mapping. So you can obviously go to to the settings and then say keymap and change it here. But there's one key that remains constant, which is Control-tilde. And what this allows me to do is a quick switch. So I can quickly switch look and feel. I normally actually use Darkula for development, but it's not that great for presentation so much. So I can say look and feel back to default. If I want to change the actual keyboard mapping, I can just say, for example, use Eclipse or use what have you, and then whenever I want, I can just press Control-Tab. So that's very cool if you're going to another person's keyboard and you want to just use their computer for a couple of minutes, you can quickly switch back and forth there. In addition to that, we have built-in terminals. So Alt-12 allows me to get all the terminal and all the goodness with all the coloring. So basically there you can create as many tabs, as many terminal as you want. And everything that you can do from outside of the terminal, you can do with inside. The REST client, So test RESTful services. This is great. A lot of people don't know this, but you can basically do any HTTP requests. So get, put, post, delete, head options, etc. to any port. You can define cookies, get the response header, define the request body, whether it's a file upload, file contents, absolutely everything. I use this all the time when I'm talking to HTTP API endpoints or RESTful endpoints. Okay, so that's very handy to have that inside. And also, one last thing that I want to mention is when we go to edit stuff, let me just quickly open this Express app. One of the main pains is when I'm working with JSON. So let's say I come here and I say, okay, var some JSON equals, and now I got to write JSON. So here we go. So curly braces, and then I've got to put a hi, and now a tag, a name, and then another name. Oh no, I had to put the, and it just quickly becomes a mess. We have this very powerful feature in IntelliJ platform, which is called language injections. Just put quotes, hit Alt Enter, inject language extension, say JSON. What that has, now that's JSON. By the way, remember, see I didn't put the semicolon because I like to argue about semicolons in JavaScript. No, Shift Command Enter, that complete statement. It also inserts a semicolon. Obviously, you don't want to do 3 keyboard bindings instead of 1, but it does more things. So if I do some JSON is not null, empty, Shift Command Enter will actually complete, that should complete the statement for me. What am I doing? Okay, never mind. Right, going back to this JSON, what I now have is language injected. So now, what I've just told IntelliJ that there is language JSON injected inside this. I can come back, hit Alt Enter, and say edit JSON fragment, and here now I can write my JSON peacefully and not have to worry about all those escaping characters. Right? So it does that for me. And much like JSON, I can, var HTML equals and inject some other language, Markdown, HTML, etc. So now IntelliJ is actually treating that as JSON. The editor is a nice bonus that you get, but it's actually treating that as JSON. So it will detect issues that JSON could potentially have in that string. Right, that's about all we have time for. Just to wrap up, 2 things that I normally recommend. And Katia, I believe you were asking me this. One of them is the help menu. I know no one ever goes to it, but there's this thing called the default keymap reference, which, believe it or not, yes, opens up a PDF on a website that gives you keyboard map reference. And this other thing called the productivity guide, which no one ever uses because they also think that it's going to open up a PDF, but it's not. This is very useful. You could have just looked at this and not come to this presentation. What this basically does is show you tips and things that are available when you last used it and how many times you've used it. So you can click on last use, scroll down, and see which ones you have never used, okay? And that will help you pick up some new tips and tricks. Last but not least, my favorite keyboard shortcut, I don't have one, but one that I always say you should remember is Shift Command A, because that basically allows me to look up any action with WebStorm. If I don't know how to do something, I just do Shift Command A and I say rename, and that will give me the options to rename, refactor, or what have you. And it also highlights, if applicable, the actual keyboard binding. So you can learn from that every time you invoke it. So structure, etc., shows me Command 7. Okay, so Shift Command A, that's one keyboard binding you should kind of try and remember. And with that, I think we're done for time, and I more or less believe that we basically covered everything. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to cover the debugger. I'll quickly just say to you, when you set a breakpoint, make sure you right-click and you click this More Info, because it opens up a whole bunch of options that you can suspend based on a specific condition, log messages to output, etc. So don't forget about that more option. Sometimes it's useful. And I think we're done. Katia?
Yes. Thank you, Hadi. That was really awesome. What I want to say is that the recording will be available in a couple of days, so follow our blog or WebStorm ID on Twitter. Yeah, and of course you'll get an email with the link to the recording. And if you have any questions, just tweet us or go to our issue tracker and submit your feature requests. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Hadi, for this awesome presentation.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, and goodbye. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.